My dear students, Assalamu alaikum. In this lecture, we'll analyze the case of simultaneous change in demand and supply and its effect on equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Dear students, in our previous lecture, we discussed how equilibrium price and quantity change if there is change in either demand only or supply only. However, in reality, there are a number of situations which leads to simultaneous changes in both demand and supply. That is, when both demand and supply changes simultaneously. So here in this lecture, we'll examine the effect on market equilibrium, that is on equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, when both demand and supply changes simultaneously. There are two cases of simultaneous change in demand and supply, or we can say simultaneous shift in demand and supply curve. Case first, simultaneous increase in demand and supply. That is, when both demand and supply increases simultaneously. Case second, simultaneous decrease in demand and supply. That is, when both demand and supply decreases simultaneously. Let us first discuss the first situation, when both demand and supply increases simultaneously. Dear students, it is obvious that when both demand and supply increases simultaneously, it will cause increase in equilibrium quantity of a commodity, which means that in this case equilibrium quantity will increase. But what will happen to equilibrium price? That is, whether equilibrium price increases, decreases, or remains the same in case of simultaneous increase in demand and supply. It depends on whether demand increases more than supply, less than supply, or the rate of increase in demand is equal to the rate of increase in supply. Accordingly, there can be three situations in this respect. Situation first, when increase in demand is equal to increase in supply. Case second, when increase in demand is greater than increase in supply. And case third, when increase in demand is less than increase in supply. We'll illustrate these three cases separately with the help of diagrams in our coming slides. Case first is when increase in demand is exactly equal to the increase in supply. Here in this figure, DD and SS are the original demand and supply curve. Both the curves intersect at point E. Thus, point E is the original equilibrium position. At point E, OP is equilibrium price and OQ is equilibrium quantity. In case of increase in demand and supply, both the demand and supply curves shift rightwards to D1 D1 and S1 S1 respectively. We can see from the figure that increase in demand is equal to increase in supply. As both demand and supply increase in the same proportion, equilibrium price remains the same at OP, but equilibrium quantity increases from OQ to OQ1. So we can say that when increase in demand is equal to increase in supply, equilibrium price will remain same, but equilibrium quantity will increase. Now coming to case second, when increase in demand is greater than increase in supply. Here in this figure, the original equilibrium position is at point E, where the original demand curve DD intersects the initial supply curve SS, and at point E, OP is equilibrium price and OQ is equilibrium quantity. Now due to increase in demand curve shifts rightwards from DD to D1, and due to increase in supply curve also shifts rightwards from SS to S1. We can see from the figure that increase in demand is much greater than increase in supply. As we can see here that rightward shift in demand curve from DD to D1 is proportionately greater than the rightward shift in supply curve from SS to S1. As demand increases more than supply, it is a situation of excess demand. Due to excess demand, the equilibrium price tends to increase from OP to OP1, and equilibrium quantity also increases from OQ to OQ1. The new equilibrium position is at point E1, where the new demand curve D1 intersects the new supply curve S1. So students, we can say that when increase in demand is greater than increase in supply, both equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity will rise. Now case third, when increase in demand is less than increase in supply. Here the initial demand curve DD and the initial supply curve SS intersect each other at point E. So point E is the original equilibrium position, OP is the equilibrium price, and OQ is the equilibrium quantity. In case of increase in demand and increase in supply, demand curve shifts rightwards to D1 and supply curve also shifts rightwards to S1. From the figure, it is clear that increase in demand is less than the increase in supply, or we can say increase in supply is greater than increase in demand. As we can observe from the figure that the rightward shift in demand curve from DD to D1 is less than the rightward shift in supply curve from SS to S1. So it is a situation of excess supply, as the increase in supply is greater than increase in demand. The excess supply will lead the equilibrium price to fall from OP to OP1, whereas the equilibrium quantity increases from OQ to OQ1, as there is increase in both demand and supply. So we can say that when increase in demand is less than increase in supply, or in other words, when increase in supply is greater than increase in demand, then the equilibrium price will fall and the equilibrium quantity will increase. Let's now illustrate the effect of a simultaneous decrease in demand and supply on equilibrium price and quantity. That is the case when both demand and supply decreases simultaneously. Students, when both demand and supply decreases simultaneously, equilibrium quantity will decrease, which is obvious. But what will happen to equilibrium price? It again depends on three different situations. First, when decrease in demand is equal to decrease in supply. Case second, when decrease in demand is greater than decrease in supply. And case third, when decrease in demand is less than decrease in supply. So case first is when decrease in demand is equal to decrease in supply. That is when demand and supply decreases in the same proportion. Here in this figure, original equilibrium position is at point E, where initial demand curve DD and supply curve SS intersect each other. And at point E, equilibrium price is OP and equilibrium quantity is OQ. In case of decrease in demand and supply, the demand curve shifts leftwards from DD to D1, D1, and supply curve also shifts leftwards from SS to S1, S1. When decrease in demand is proportionately equal to decrease in supply, then leftward shift in demand curve from DD to D1, D1 is proportionately equal to leftward shift in supply curve from SS to S1, S1, as can be seen from the figure. The new equilibrium point is determined at E1 as demand and supply decreases in the same proportion. As we can see from the figure, at point E1, which is the new equilibrium point, equilibrium price remains the same at OP, but equilibrium quantity falls from OQ to OQ1. So we can say that when the decrease in demand is equal to decrease in supply, equilibrium price will remain the same, but equilibrium quantity will decrease. Now coming to case second, which is when decrease in demand is greater than decrease in supply, the initial equilibrium point is determined at point E, where the original demand curve DD intersects the original supply curve SS. At point E, equilibrium price is OP and equilibrium quantity is OQ. Due to decrease in demand, the demand curve shifts leftwards from DD to D1, D1, and due to decrease in supply, supply curve also shifts leftwards from SS to S1, S1. Here in this figure, it is clear that decrease in demand is greater than decrease in supply, as the leftward shift in demand curve from DD to D1, D1 is greater than the leftward shift in supply curve from SS to S1, S1. As decrease in demand is greater than decrease in supply, it is thus a situation of excess supply as demand has decreased more than supply. Due to excess supply, the equilibrium price tends to fall can be seen from the figure, the new equilibrium is determined at point E1 where new demand karo D1 and new supply karo S1 intersect each other. At the new equilibrium point E1, the equilibrium price falls from OP to OP1 and equilibrium quantity also falls from OQ to OQ1. So we can say that when decrease in demand is greater than decrease in supply, both the equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price will fall. Now coming to the case third, when decrease in demand is less than decrease in supply. The original equilibrium position is at point E, where the demand curve DD intersects the original supply curve SS. The equilibrium price is OP and the equilibrium quantity is OQ. Dear students, here we can see that due to decrease in demand, the demand curve shifts leftwards from DD to D1 and supply curve also shifts leftwards from SS to S1. Here we can see the leftward shift in supply curve from SS to S1 is greater than the leftward shift in demand curve from DD to D1, which means that the decrease in supply is greater than the decrease in demand. Or in other words, decrease in demand is less than the decrease in supply. So it is a situation of excess demand, as decrease in supply is more than decrease in demand. Due to excess demand, the equilibrium price will tend to rise. As can be seen from the figure, the new equilibrium is established at point E1 where new demand and supply curve intersect each other. At the new equilibrium point E1, the equilibrium price rises from OP to OP1, whereas equilibrium quantity falls from OQ to OQ1. So we can say that when the decrease in demand is less than decrease in supply, or in other words, when decrease in supply is greater than the decrease in demand, then in that very case, the equilibrium price will rise, but the equilibrium quantity will fall. So students, with this topic, we completed the fourth chapter of your paper A. Rather, we completed your whole paper A. Now from tomorrow onwards, inshallah, we will start paper B. Thank you.